Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Follow Your Passion. Let me introduce my guest of today. His name is Robert P. French. Robert is a software developer turned actor turned author. He was born and raised in England, and at the age of 26, he emigrated from the UK to Canada for a couple of years, and he hasn't returned ever since. He is the writer of so far 7 Rogan crime thrillers about a drug-addicted ex-cop who fights his way from living rough on the streets to being a much sought-after private investigator. Robert is passionate about the beauty of having the right words on the page, and with every new book, his goal is to make it better than the previous one. Welcome, Robert. How are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell me about this little journey you made from starting out as a software developer, turning an actor, turning an author.
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be an actor. And my dad wouldn't let me. He said, no, you've got to have a sensible profession. So I was fascinated by computers. And so I became a computer programmer and then various software development roles. Mm-hmm. And, but when, you might want to psychoanalyze me on this, when my father died, I decided I'd try taking up acting. And I did that. I did it part-time for 7 years, and I really enjoyed it. But I got this thing about writing. And what happened was I was a chief technology officer in a small software company, and the company failed to get its final financing. And we basically had to close shop, and I didn't have a job anymore, and I'd put a lot of my money into this company, so I didn't have a lot of money anymore. So I found some contract work, but one day I'd finished talking to a bunch of people on the phone, and I got this idea for a book in my head. So I sat at my computer, started typing, and wrote something like 7,000 words, and it was like 2 or 3 in the morning when I'd finished.
Wow.
And suddenly I realized I'd got this bug. It took me, from that point, it took me 8 years of learning how to become a writer, writing several really bad books. But I finally got the trick, and I got a wonderful mentor as well who helped me. And so I ended up publishing my first book, and since then it's been just full-time writing ever since.
Nice. So this first book you published, was that the Rogan crime thriller?
Yeah, it was. The book's called Junkie, and it's the start of his journey. At the beginning of the book, he's actually living on the streets, and he's addicted to heroin, and he's got 2 good things in his life. He's got his best friend who's stood by him, and he's also got his daughter that she's 6 years old in the first book, and he just adores her, and he pulls himself together once a week to have a visit with her. And this particular day, he finds that his best friend has been murdered. And so even though he's drug addicted and living on the streets, he's determined he's going to find out who actually murdered his friend. The police say it's a suicide, but he knows it's not a suicide deep down. So that's how it all starts.
Nice. And you already written 7 books. So when you wrote your first crime thriller, were you already thinking about a sequel, or was it just one story to do it and you came up with the second and the third and it started like that?
Yeah, like that. I wrote the first book I was thinking it would be a standalone, but when I came to the end of it, one of the things that's driving him is he really would like to be a cop again. When he starts to investigate his friend's murder, all of that kind of excitement and that joy and that passion comes to the fore. So when I got to the end of the book, I thought, well, I've really got to write a second book about this guy. And here we are 7 books later with 2 more I'm working on at the moment.
Oh, wow. So if you would compare your 7 books and the 2 new ones you're currently writing already, do you see some sort of progression in the main character, or maybe the other characters in the book? Or
yeah, it's been fun watching the characters grow over the period of writing the books. The main character, I mean, once you're an addict, you're always an addict, and he's often haunted by thoughts of heroin, and in a couple of the books he has relapses which he has to get through, and some of the characters, it's amazing. In one book I had a character who was somebody living on the streets, and one of his friends had been murdered, and he wants Cal to investigate the murder. And he's a homeless alcoholic, and he has a friend who's also a homeless alcoholic. But these 2 guys have really become part of the series. They're in every book now. And he uses them to do surveillance and things like that, on the basis of everyone that ignores a homeless guy, so they're perfect to do surveillance.
Nice.
And yeah, it's and a lot of the other characters have grown. He's in the current books, he's in a private investigation agency with a former cop. And the former cop has become a great character as well. At one point he got badly injured, and when my wife read the first draft of the book, she said, "You better never kill that guy, because if you do, I'm divorcing you."
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. So the characters have grown, and it's almost by magic. They grow by themselves, as it were. Something will happen, and a character will say something, and it will open up a new part of that person's character. I'm what they call a pantser. I write by the seat of my pants. I don't plan books in great detail. I know roughly what they're about, and sometimes I'll know the end of the book, but not always. But I just write and see what happens, and that does some wonderful things for my characters, because they grow in unexpected ways.
Nice.
So yeah, I just love it.
I was about to ask, but I think you already answered it for the most part. Do you need to do a lot of research for your books, or does it just come natural?
No, I do a lot of research. For example, if somebody uses a gun, I'll look up everything about that gun. And but the big thing I had to do in research was drug addiction. And I got to speak to a former drug addict who ran an organization called the Vancouver Drug Users Association. And it was a place to help people who are currently living on the streets and drug addicted. And I spent a lot of time with this guy. He walked me around the streets of the downtown east side of Vancouver is the kind of sketchy area where the drug deals happen. And he walked me through the streets and showed me, that's a drug dealer. This is how the drug dealers work. And the drug dealers have quite a clever process to make sure that the police don't catch them. And so I did a lot of research, and what was really interesting out of that research, I completely changed my attitude on drug addiction. I've got the fairly controversial position that I think all drugs should be legalized and controlled, and any company that wants, cigarette companies, liquor companies, can manufacture drugs, but under exactly the same rules that they manufacture tobacco or alcohol. treat it just like that, make it completely legal, and have warnings on the packaging, just like we do for alcohol and cigarettes. And that is the only way to solve the drug problem, because it takes the drug distribution out of the hands of criminals, and it means that people won't have to steal for their drugs, because the criminals, their markup on drugs is hundreds of percent. They make an absolute fortune. So if you take it out of the hands of criminals, then one, you're taking a criminal's money supply away, and you can, if the companies sell them making the same sort of markups they make on alcohol and tobacco, then the criminals won't have a business anymore.
Yeah. Well, you're talking to somebody from the Netherlands, so it's not that controversial.
Yeah, anyone from parts of the United States watching this will be tearing their hair out at the moment.
Yeah. It also made me think that, do you think that previous being an actor helped you to develop your characters?
Yes, it did. Because I write in the first person. So whoever is the point of view character, they're saying, I'm walking down the street and something feels strange. So I don't really have I found that when I started writing, that's the way I wrote: first person, present tense. And so when I'm writing, it's kind of inhabiting my body. So I'm doing it in my mind. And so I think that as an actor, I get to understand the characters, because that's a big part of acting, is understanding the characters as I put them on the page. So I think acting certainly has been an important part of my history to make me the writer I am.
Yeah, I can imagine that, because acting is not just playing a role, it's becoming the role, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Not saying that you're going to use heroin to play Rex, even better, but you know what I mean.
No, I won't do that.
Yeah. So I was just thinking about this movie series Star Wars, where you have part 3, 4, 5, and 6, and after that came 1, 2, and 3, right? Do you think that Cal will keep developing until his old age, or might it be like a new book that will tell about his beginnings, or how he became an ex-cop, or something like that? Well, or would it be a sidetrack?
Yeah, actually a sidetrack. I have actually thought about writing a book -1 that is how he became a drug addict. Though that is kind of revealed towards the end of the first book. But I've gone another way. I mentioned that he has a daughter that he absolutely adores, and she's 6 years old in the first book, and in the current book, she's 13 years old. And one of the books that I'm writing at the moment is set in 2044, and she's 35 years old, and she is a detective. And so there's no science fiction or fantasy elements to it. It's just speculative fiction. But she's dealing with murders. The first murder she gets to deal with couldn't happen today because of how I'm not going to give too much away, but because we don't have the technology to commit a murder in this way at the moment. That's proving very interesting, because my tech background, I'm still very in touch with technology. So I'm projecting where technology is going to go by 2044. Politics is fascinating right now, especially if you can stand back a bit and observe it. and watching how that is evolving. So I've got some ideas as to what politics might look like in 2044. So there's a whole bunch of ideas in there that I'm really enjoying putting on the page. So I chose the first day of the book to be my 100th birthday.
Nice.
Yeah. So hopefully I'll get to see one.
Yeah. Could you have ever imagined when you were young that you would become the writer you are today?
Not really. When I was 21 or something, I did write a book of horror stories, and I wrote them on an old Underwood typewriter, and I still have them in a folder somewhere in my office. And at the time I was interested in becoming a writer, but I didn't really think they were good enough, and they weren't. And I didn't know at that time, 21, I was a fairly immature 21. I didn't know how to even go about getting a book published. And I'd already started my career in computers. So, but I never imagined that, I would be an author with 7 books. The last one is an award-winning book as well. It won the gold medal in the self-publishing awards for global awards for self-publishing. So,
nice.
I never imagined that would happen.
No, and I even heard somebody say that the next one will be even better.
Yes, it will be. Yes. I wonder who said that. Yeah. It's a challenge I've set myself that I sometimes worry about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that you and I are the perfect examples of how science and creativity can come together. Because, you have a background as a software developer, and you're writing fiction stories, right? Crime thrillers. And you're also imagining, sharing your ideas, how the future will be, in your next book.
Yeah.
I'm a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering. So I studied also some bit of applied science. I'm now a coach. I'm using storytelling in my sessions as well. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Isaac Asimov. Which, of course,
yes, I've read every book he's ever
he
written.
was a mathematics, right? And he wrote a lot of robot novels and wonderful stories, by the way.
Oh, fantastic stories! Yeah.
But it's funny how science, or left brainers, as people might call us, use their creative side to create those things.
Yeah. Well, I always used to joke that software developers have to be very creative when saying when they're going to finish their task.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you mentioned Asimov, because I've read every one of his books. I love Asimov.
Yeah.
And he's one of his books is set on a planet, Aurora, where the people don't actually meet each other in person. Every interaction is virtual, and they have 3D avatars of their friends, and they will talk to them. And they'll have dinner together, and their friend's avatar is sitting at the end of the table eating his food. And that in some ways was an amazing forerunner of how we do so many things virtually now.
Oh, yeah.
My publicist, Mickey Mickelson, he recently lost a very good friend, and this chap had become a very, very close friend of his, but they had never actually met face to face. Yet they became very good friends, and Asimov really nailed that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the English name is, but I think it's something like Stories from the Future. He has written. I've written read one book of him with very short stories about the future, and they're amazing if you read those, right? And he's written them somewhere in the 60s, I think.
Yes. He started writing in the 40s.
Yeah. There's this one story about where I think it was at the age of 18, you get to hear what kind of job you are going to get. And there was this one guy that there was this marvelous machine, you know, the state-of-art machine that he really wanted to steer, you know, and he knew he could control that machine. And he wasn't chosen for that one. He was chosen for 2 versions older, right? And his friend was chosen for the new one. And he was very upset because he knew he could drive the newest one, right? And so he wanted to prove it, but he wasn't allowed to. And at one day he was taken away from his house, from his parents. And he was sat in a little chamber, and a man came to him and he said, you know, why am I here, right? Well, you're here because you didn't want to fulfill your job, you know, driving the old machine. He said, but I know I can drive the new ones, right? Well, how do you know that? Because you didn't get the program. No, but I read books and I know how to do it. I studied them, you know. And he said, yes, we know you did that, right? And we're absolutely know and confident that you can do that. So the guy was amazed. But okay, so if you know why you do that, that I can do that, why am I sitting here? He said, well, we need people like you. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, you're creative, you know, you're self-supporting. You're who do you think that are creating all those upgrades of those machines? He said, well, I don't know. I said, well, people like you, we need you, you know, but you're the only 1% of all mankind that can do that. So in order to protect mankind, we have to say that you're crazy. We have to take you away from the rest of the people. Because in other words, they have to say that 99% of mankind is stupid.
Yes.
Not to be able to do it. So, those kind of stories that's in this book. And there's also that one story that a person can do math in his head. And the whole world is amazed, you know. So they gave him some sums and some equations, and he all solved them with just a little piece of paper and a pen. And they said, well, whoa, do you know what it means? This means that we are becoming independent of the machines. Because nobody could do that in that time. And
it's funny you say that I've noticed over time that people are losing math skills left, right, and center. People who work in shops, they would always work out what the change was to give somebody when we had cash. Nobody does that anymore. Nobody needs to do that anymore. And I remember, you know, before we had smartphones, I knew in my head the phone numbers of nearly all of my friends and all of my family. I'll bet I had 100 phone numbers in my head. Nobody does that anymore. The only person whose phone number I actually know is my wife's. Everybody else, I just tap their name and it works.
Or just say it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the same here, you know. I have a thing with numbers as well, you know. I can still remember my social security number, my wife's actually, my bank account number. But it's what you say, you know. It has become so easy, you know. With just saying who you want to call, and you don't. The hardest thing when I had a new phone number myself, the hardest thing to memorize was my own number, because I never called myself. But
Plus, with your own your previous number, it was in your head and just came out of your mouth.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah. I can see that whole thing about losing skills as technology gets better and better. That's a real issue, I think. And I'm addressing that in this new book, because if you no longer need to do arithmetic, we will lose that skill. People will still learn it in school, I hope. But the moment they leave school, they'll forget it because they can pick up their phone. And I see my youngest son doing this. He picks up his phone and says, you know, what's 17 times 23? And it tells him. I would do that in my head, but he doesn't. And I'm worried about what we may lose by giving over mental work to artificial intelligence. So there's an artificial intelligence somebody's been working on to write a book, and apparently it's not there yet. But what happens if no chess player can beat the artificial intelligence players now? What happens when no writer can write a book better than the artificial intelligence can? That's it gives me pause.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that the hardest thing, in my opinion, for a machine is to describe emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And as a human, we have developed this skill of putting emotion in a words.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an art of writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can write the crime thriller called Rogan, just
mm-hmm.
like a fact-based story, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's the emotion behind it, you know, the feeling behind it, that will keep people sitting on the edge of the seat until the
mm-hmm.
end.
Well, that's right. However, you know, if you get artificial intelligence machines to study the writing of writers who are very good at expressing emotion, that machine will learn how to do it without understanding necessarily the emotion that they're expressing. It's very scary what machine learning can do. The other thing is, if you give artificial intelligence devices control of items, like we're giving them control of our cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then there are all sorts of dangers there. What if you gave artificial intelligence? I mean, there are books written on this subject, both fiction and non-fiction. What happens if you gave an artificial intelligence control of your weapons, a country's weapons system?
Yep. And
that artificial intelligence decides that the world will be a heck of a lot better place without humans. Not a good.
Isn't that like the storyline of iRobot?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
one of the designers, he saw that happening, and he created a robot that didn't comply with the robot with the rules.
With the rules, the 3 rules of robotics that I still remember. Yeah. So Asimov was one of the science fiction writers. He got his timing wrong on some things, but he had a wonderful vision of where the future could go. But I do worry a lot about giving artificial intelligence control of things. What if the artificial intelligence gets so smart that it doesn't like me? It crashes my car into a brick wall, right?
Yeah. So that would be a scary future indeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you think the minds of all those movie directors work, you know, when they're creating those stories? Because I love all kinds of movies that have like a different approach to the world, you know, like The Matrix. I love The Matrix, but there's also the one with Jet Li. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one.
Which one?
The One. It's
The
a movie,
One.
yeah, with Jet Li.
It's funny that my youngest son, who's still at home, loves Jackie Chan movies, and we just watched a Jackie Chan movie with Jet Li, and he really liked Jet Li. So, and I noticed in the Netflix, it's on Netflix, The One, I think.
I think so, yeah. But it's about that you have you don't have one universe, right? You have a multiverse. So there are different worlds, parallel worlds, and it is said that like your energy is spread over those different worlds. So there are like 150 Robert Franches in each world has one. And it has become possible to travel between those worlds. And there's an agency that, of course, controls this traveling, right? And one of those agents kills himself in another world by accident. And he notices he is getting stronger from that. Because the energy, if you die in one world, the energy will be spread over the other 149 worlds.
Okay.
So he's traveling all those other parallel worlds to kill himself because he becomes stronger. And at the end,
his opponent's becoming stronger too.
Of course. And at the end, there are two Jet Li's, of course, a good one and a bad one. But it's very interesting how those writers came up with those alternative realities, so to speak. It's the same as the Matrix, right? What if the Matrix would have been real? How do you come up with such kind of stories?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, we could all live in the Matrix and not know it.
Yeah.
So there's a very interesting proposition by a Swedish philosopher, and his premise is that if there were an advanced enough civilization with an advanced enough computer system, in that computer system you could program it with the laws of physics and simulate an entire universe. And his name's Nick Bostrom, well worth reading his stuff. And so he said that we could be living in a simulation of a universe that you and I are just computer programs working through the simulation in the universe of this universe. Yeah. So that's another interesting thought that one could write a movie around.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's well, I remember that a famous Dutch man, he once said, you know, that this whole research about alien life was it was a waste of time, he said, because he said if you would find alien life forms that are more intelligent than we are, right? They will find us faster than we can find them. And if they're not smarter than we are, why would you want to find them?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, I often wonder about that if the smarter ones find us and think, oh, this is like an ant colony. Let's pour some boiling water over it.
Yeah, but it's amazing how it's a very interesting time where we live in. I think you know it's amazing how far we've come. You know, if you look at the past, but the future is still to come, and it's. I can't even imagine how the world will look like in 10, 20 years from now? You know,
No,
if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would be doing what I'm doing right now, I probably would have laughed at you, right?
yeah.
I'm here, you know, I'm happy. I'm doing what I love to do.
Mm-hmm.
How will life look after 5 to 10 years, you know?
Yeah,
How do you do that? Because you said, you know, that your next book is in 2044, you know, it's about 22 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
How do you imagine something like that?
You just do, you know, it just comes, the ideas come to your mind. And I've thought a lot about the future, because feel very privileged that on the day that I was born, there were the total number of computers in the world was 5. And they were all in Bletchley Park in Britain under the control of Alan Turing, working on cracking the Enigma codes. Mm-hmm. And now we've got more than that number of computers in our household, if you include phones and iPads as computers.
Oh yeah.
So I've lived through that whole thing. So the next 100 years are going to be fantastically interesting. One of the things that I think we will definitely crack is the aging dilemma. I think that people born today could very easily live to be 300 years old, maybe longer. Another interesting future thing is the merger of a cyborg, a human and a robot with artificial intelligence. Given that, a device like that could live effectively forever. So there's a lot of I'm really going to miss out on the next 100 years. I think that really, really bugs me that I don't think they're going to solve the aging problem in time for me.
Well, you never know, right?
You never know. Yes, stay positive. That's my motto.
Definitely. Robert, I have a feeling we can talk for hours on all those subjects, you know, philosophizing about the future and stuff that's coming. If you could share one little tip or piece of wisdom with the audience, what would it be?
Persistence is the most important thing. You know, I had in my early writing life, I had failure after failure after failure to produce a decent book over a period of 7, almost 8 years before I finally got a book that was worth being published. And it would have been very, very easy to give up. Then again, you have to know when to quit. But persistence is a key thing to getting anything done. So that's I don't like to use the word wisdom, because every time you think you've got some wisdom, the universe proves to you that you don't.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But at least when the universe proves that you don't, at least you got a little wiser, right?
That's that's the enigma, yes.
So if people want to know more about you, Robert, or get in touch with you, or become addicted to your crime thriller series called Rogan, how can they do that?
If they go to my website, it's robertpfrench.com. And if you go to the website, you can get a free copy of the first book as well. So get you started, and hopefully you become addicted too. And of course, I'm on Facebook as well as Robert P. French, author. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Robert, for being my guest and having this wonderful conversation. I'm really looking forward to parts 8 and 9 of the Call Rogan series. And keep up the good work, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd love to stay in touch. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been great.